Hey everybody, it's Brittany with Divine Bloom and welcome back to my channel. Here at Divine Bloom, we're all about growing in God and staying rooted in God. And a part of staying rooted in God is learning to make God a priority. It's learning to place God first. So I have a question for you. Yes, you. Can you honestly say that God is number one in your life? Can you honestly say that God is a priority? Now I know we probably all would like to answer, of course, yes, Brittany, God is number one. Of course, God is my priority. But here's the thing. The way that we spend our time, the way that we spend our money, the way that we use our talent and ability, all these things, they reveal where our priorities really lie. See, the thing about it is, if I was to get a front row seat in your life, which I don't want because it's your business, okay? But let's say hypothetically speaking, if I were to have a front row seat in your life and I was able to have access to the things that you look at on the internet, the amount of time that you spend on social media, the thoughts that run through your mind, the way that you think about others, the way that you think about yourself, if I were to have access to this, would it reveal to me that God is your number one priority? Would it? Ask yourself, does the way that I spend my time, does it reveal that God is the number one priority in my life? Does my thought life, does that reveal that God is the number one priority in my life? Does the way that I spend my money, does that reveal that God is the number one priority in my life? Listen, if God is not the number one priority in your life, we need to fix that. So on today, I want to give you 3 practical tips that you can implement. You can implement them ASAP to start making God the number one priority in your life. All right, stay tuned. All right, so today let's talk about making God a priority. Let's make him number one. So the very first practical tip that I have for you is to learn to give God the very first part of your day. It looks like this. As soon as you open up your eyes, open them up, okay? The very first thing that you say is, God, I thank you. This is what I do. I say, Lord, thank you for this day. This is a day that you have made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. What this doing is acknowledging that God created this day, that God, you're first. Before I do anything else, before I start scrolling on Instagram, before I start scrolling on Facebook, before I turn on CNN, God, I acknowledge that you are first. I'm putting you above everything else, okay? And what I think you'll find is you'll start having a better day, because if you start your day with Facebook and Instagram, what happens sometimes is, let's say the very first thing you see is, you know what, your cousin, she's getting married and you're single. Your cousin or your aunt, she just bought a new house and you're still in an apartment. And what happens is discontentment, it can grow in your heart. Or let's say you watch CNN. The very first thing that you do when you wake up is watch CNN. If you're not careful, fear can grow in your heart. But when you acknowledge God first, when you put him first, the very first part of your day, you're guarding your heart against those things. So that's why it's vital to give God the very first part of your day. And it's simple. You could do this with prayer, with Bible study, read a devotional, turn on inspirational music, inspirational messages, but give God the very first part of your day. All right, so that's my first practical tip. All right, so the second practical tip that I have for you is to start considering God before you make any decisions. So it's simply stated and broke down like this. This is an old phrase. What would Jesus do? So before you send that email popping off, you know what we like to do per my last email, consider God. Really ask yourself, is what I'm doing going to bring God glory? Is what I'm doing honoring God? Before you watch that movie that you have conviction about, ask God, is this movie, is it going to glorify you? Ask God before you make any decisions, the big stuff, the small stuff. But what you're doing is you're saying, God, I acknowledge you first. Your priority, you're number one. So I want to run my decisions past you. All right, that's how we make God a priority in our life. So that's my second practical tip. All right, so my third, my final practical tip to learn to make God number one, to make him a priority, is to start making God's priorities your priorities. All right, I'll say that again. Learn to make God's priorities your priorities. And God's priorities is to seek and to save the lost. God's priorities is to show the love of Christ and to encourage others and to lift others up. So those priorities should be our priorities. And it could be small. It could be as simple as sending a text message to someone or calling someone saying, hey, I was thinking about you, or pouring into somebody else. But what you're doing is saying, God, I acknowledge that your will is first and I want to do your will on this earth. So I am going to make your priorities, what you want done in the earth, my priorities. Okay, so that's the third and final practical tip that I have for you. Well, friends, I hope these tips were helpful, and again, implement them ASAP. All right, start making God's priorities your priorities. Start making God the priority in your life. Start making him number one. Matthew 6:33, it says to seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things, they will be added unto you. So start seeking first the kingdom of God, and I bet your life will transform. Okay, well, friends, you know what I need you to do. I need you to stay rooted in God. I love you, and we will talk again soon. Peace.